Imagine waking up one morning, feeling exactly the same as you did yesterday. You get out of bed, blink against the sunlight streaming through your window, and stretch, ready to tackle another day. There's just one problem. Overnight, something impossible has happened. All the DNA in your body has vanished. Every single molecule. You look in the mirror, expecting to see your familiar face, but just as you smile, you begin to wonder, what actually keeps you looking the way you do? Beneath the surface, at levels so tiny you can't see with your naked eye, the blueprint that makes you, your DNA, has simply ceased to exist. To understand the implications of this bizarre scenario, we need to begin by exploring what DNA really is, why it's so fundamental to life, and precisely what would unravel if this vital molecule suddenly disappeared. DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, is often called the blueprint of life. It is the molecule that stores the information necessary to build and maintain every living organism on Earth, from the smallest bacterium to the tallest tree, and of course, to you. This information is written in a chemical code made up of 4 different building blocks called nucleotides, which are arranged in a precise sequence within the famous double helix structure. Every trait that defines you, your eye color, your height, the unique way your brain works, is encoded in your DNA, stored deep within the nucleus of every cell in your body. Now imagine that vital script being wiped clean, not only from you, but, hypothetically, from all living things. What would the immediate consequences of the sudden absence of DNA be? What would happen as moments, hours, or days ticked by after this seismic change? Could life, as we know it, continue in any form, even for a few seconds? Let's start with the cells. Your body is made up of trillions of them, each performing specialized functions. Your brain cells communicate via electric impulses. Your muscle cells contract to move your limbs. Your liver cells filter toxins. Despite the tremendous variety in size, shape, and job, almost all of your cells have a nucleus that houses your DNA. Within the nucleus, DNA is wound tightly into chromosomes, and its instructions are continually being read and transcribed by molecular machines. These instructions are then sent out to the rest of the cell, guiding the construction of proteins. Intricate molecular machines that build, repair, and regulate everything that happens within. Proteins are the workhorses of life. They create the architecture of cells, enable muscle movements, shuttle nutrients, defend against disease, and drive chemical reactions needed for survival. The recipes for making these proteins are written into your DNA. Remove the DNA, and you've erased the recipe book mid-bake. But what if the DNA simply flickered out of existence in an instant? For the next few seconds, or even minutes, you might not notice anything. The proteins that are already present in your cells would continue doing their jobs, since they do not immediately depend on DNA to function. The machinery is already in place. But this period of normalcy would be tragically brief. Cell function relies on a constant flow of fresh proteins. Many proteins have short lifespans, some lasting only minutes before being broken down and recycled. Without DNA, the cell can no longer manufacture new instructions for building more proteins. The cell's emergency response systems, such as those that repair DNA or signal the cell to divide or heal, would become non-functional because those systems themselves are dependent on instructions from DNA. It wouldn't take long before the loss of fresh protein production starts to take its toll. Without new proteins to replace those that degrade, essential cellular machinery would fall apart. Cellular membranes would become leaky, vital processes would grind to a halt, and the signals that regulate your heartbeat, breathing, and thinking would begin to fail. Even worse, DNA is responsible for copying itself during cell division. Every time you grow, heal, or just maintain healthy tissue, your cells divide, each one copying its DNA so that every new cell has a complete set of instructions. Without DNA, cell division would come to an immediate stop. Injured tissues couldn't heal, worn-out blood, skin, and intestinal cells couldn't be replaced, and the most basic maintenance of your tissues would end. Of course, the problems wouldn't just affect the inside of your cells. Many of the most important structures in your body are the direct result of your DNA's instructions being meticulously carried out over years, since the very moment you were conceived. The bones that support your frame, the neurons connecting your brain, and the enzymes that digest your food, all dependent from the start on information from DNA. Without that information being available, your very identity at the cellular level has just been erased. Now, let's try to imagine what would happen next. If you're standing there, moments after your DNA disappeared, you might still look entirely normal. But under a microscope, chaos is beginning to unfold. Your cells are losing control. Not only can they no longer produce the proteins needed for survival, but the various quality control mechanisms that keep dangerous mutations or infections in check are also gone. DNA repair systems that fix the daily damage caused by ultraviolet light or metabolic byproducts, they can't function without DNA either. The accumulated damage, normally repaired on the spot, would now go unaddressed, rapidly pushing your cells closer to death. Many cells, upon losing critical instructions or experiencing certain kinds of damage, undergo a kind of programmed suicide called apoptosis. It's a protective measure meant to prevent damaged cells from becoming cancerous or harmful to the body. With the DNA erased, the regulatory systems that control apoptosis would themselves malfunction or disappear. Some cells might die instantly, while others might linger. But without the DNA to issue new commands, the entire system would soon collapse. Within minutes to hours, tissues dependent on constant renewal, such as those lining your gut and blood vessels or in your bone marrow, would begin to break down as existing cells die off and no new ones replace them. Your immune system, reliant on rapid DNA replication and protein synthesis to mount defenses against bacteria and viruses, would falter almost immediately. Any pathogens already lurking on your skin, in your mouth, or in your digestive tract would meet little resistance. As this cascade of failures ripples through your body, organs would start shutting down. Your heart, deprived of fresh contractile proteins, would strain and then fail. Your nervous system, which depends on highly specialized proteins to transmit electrical signals, would stop working. In less than a day, the human body would be reduced to inoperable systems, a living organism in name only, but functionally dead at every meaningful level. It's a grim picture, but perhaps more interesting is what this scenario suggests about the way life works at its most fundamental level. Why is DNA so irreplaceable? Why haven't humans or other complex organisms evolved a backup system, something to keep the lights on if the core blueprint is lost? The answer lies in the astonishing efficiency of the DNA protein system, a relationship refined over billions of years of evolution. DNA is fantastically good at storing enormous amounts of information in a tiny space, copying itself with tremendous fidelity, and providing the precise instructions necessary for life. Nothing else comes close. To take this what-if scenario even further, let's look beyond the human body and imagine the global consequences if somehow the DNA of all living things disappeared at the same moment. First, consider the simplest form of life, bacteria. Like the cells in your body, bacteria are built from the ground up according to their DNA. Without DNA, these microbes would cease to function instantly. The rich populations of bacteria in the soil, water, and air would abruptly die out. Some processes might remain, propelled for a few extra minutes by lingering enzymes, but without fresh protein production, all life in the microbial world would grind to a halt. The same would be true for fungi, plants, and animals. Plants, which depend on DNA not just for everyday survival, but also for photosynthesis, would suddenly lose the ability to convert sunlight into energy. Impacts would cascade through ecosystems globally. In the oceans, where algae and plankton provide the base for virtually all food chains, mass extinction would occur in a matter of hours. Herbivores would lose their food source, carnivores theirs, and decomposers could no longer decompose. With the machinery of life unraveling, the biosphere as we know it would die. All the interconnected systems, forests, coral reefs, grasslands, would collapse. Even the cycles of nitrogen and carbon that support the atmosphere and climate would come to a halt, as the living engines that drive them disappeared. But what would be left? If DNA simply vanished but left everything else, proteins, cell membranes, lipids, carbohydrates, intact momentarily, you might be left with ghostly echoes of life, trees still standing, animals still lying at rest, flowers still blooming, human cities still bustling for just a few fleeting moments. But rapidly, as each living thing expired, the planet would become eerily silent, devoid of the basic plan that makes life self-sustaining and self-renewing. The world would be transformed forever. Now, let's dive deeper and examine the whispers of life's legacy that might remain after this hypothetical catastrophe. While DNA is the main storage medium for genetic information, there are tiny snippets of instructions, remnants, held temporarily in the form of messenger RNA or mRNA within cells. Scientists often use mRNA to measure which genes are active in a cell at a given time. If DNA vanished, some mRNA and corresponding proteins would linger for a while, but because mRNA is highly unstable, it degrades naturally in minutes or hours. The few remaining instructions would soon be erased. The cell would have no way of renewing or replacing this information. Without continuous gene expression, the machinery would sputter, then grind to a halt. Similarly, some viruses use RNA rather than DNA as their genetic code. These RNA viruses, like influenza and coronavirus, might seem poised to take over. But even they depend on their hosts, ourselves and other organisms with DNA, to reproduce, spread, and evolve. Without living hosts to infect, even purely RNA-based life would be doomed. Let's step away from the apocalyptic and consider, scientifically, why DNA is so fundamental that its loss is universally fatal. DNA's role is not just as a static storehouse of data. It is dynamic and responsive, able to adapt as the organism's environment changes. When you are exposed to sunlight, your skin cells activate certain genes to make pigments or repair damage. If you get sick, your immune cells change their gene expression to fight off invaders. These instantaneous shifts, triggered by environmental pressures, reveal that living systems are fine-tuned to work only if DNA is present and functional every moment. So, what about advances in biotechnology? Could futuristic medicine, synthetic biology, or nanotechnology provide backup systems in the absence of DNA? Today's science, remarkable though it is, cannot substitute for the fundamental role of DNA. While we can synthesize proteins in labs, create artificial cells, and even edit genomes, all these endeavors still require the blueprints that DNA provides. The prospect of DNA-free life seems distant, if not impossible, given everything we know about chemistry and biology. Yet this "what if" pushes us to ask profound questions. Are there alternative ways for information to be stored in life? Could there be exotic forms of life elsewhere in the universe that use different molecules as their blueprints? On Earth, life has apparently converged on DNA as the optimal medium for information storage. But theorists and astrobiologists are always dreaming of other possibilities. Perhaps somewhere in the cosmos, a different molecule serves as the backbone of life. A molecule that, if erased, would similarly doom its living world. There is, however, another legacy of DNA, a legacy that outlasts molecules themselves. Over millions of years, DNA has driven evolution, producing the staggering diversity of animals, plants, fungi, and microbes on Earth. Your own genome carries echoes of your ancestors, pieces of DNA passed down from parents, grandparents, and ancient forerunners going back countless generations. If DNA vanished today, it would not just be the loss of biological function. It would be the erasure of a record so deep that it reaches into the dawn of life itself. In a sense, DNA is not only the machinery of life, but its memory, the thread that connects the first spark of life to every organism alive today. Its disappearance would mean the end of life's story as told through replication, variation, and natural selection, a profoundly unique process that has shaped our planet for billions of years. But what if, for a further twist, DNA did not simply vanish, but failed to exist in the first place? would life have emerged at all? The story of DNA begins with simpler molecules that, billions of years ago, started to carry, copy, and transmit information. RNA may have played a key role. Some scientists think life began in an RNA world. But soon DNA took over because it is more stable and stores information more efficiently. Without this critical step, the world may have remained stuck at the level of simple chemistry, never reaching the complexity of cells, tissues, organs, or conscious minds. To reflect on the gravity of this thought experiment, consider that every living thing on Earth is deeply and inextricably bound to DNA. Its presence is so foundational that we rarely think about it, just as we rarely think about the laws of physics or the properties of water and air. Yet, like oxygen or gravity, DNA is essential, a silent architect that shapes and sustains the grandeur of life. If your DNA vanished in an instant, there would be no pain as such, for your nervous system, like all your other systems, would quickly fail. You would, in effect, smoothly and swiftly pass from being an intricate, living organism to a collection of lifeless molecules. There would be no last thoughts, no fading consciousness, only the quiet, final stillness as the fundamental code that animates your being is lost. But to end on a brighter note, this what-if scenario underscores just how remarkable it is that DNA exists, silently orchestrating the miracles of life, growth, healing, and thought. The next time you marvel at the simple act of breathing, moving, or imagining a new possibility, remember, at the tiniest scale, a fantastically complex molecule is humming away, copying and transmitting the information that makes you and all life possible. So, while the disappearance of your DNA would mean an abrupt end, its ongoing presence is a testament to the enduring power and resilience of life. Our bodies, and indeed all of nature, are masterpieces painted by the brush of DNA. Take a moment in wonder at the thread that binds us, not only to each other, but to every living thing that has ever existed. The indestructible, irreplaceable molecule, DNA. It truly is the greatest story ever written, one that continues every day inside each and every one of us.